Alrighty, welcome back everyone. We just did some storylines across the country. We talked about some of the biggest players in the upcoming playoff. We talked about the race for the number one overall pick. In fact, one of you dropped one of your predictions. I think Cam Ward is better than Sanders, but we will see. Absolutely. I think Cam Ward absolutely is one of those guys that is definitely a little bit more of a dark horse for that number one overall pick, but could make that jump. And if he does, his ceiling is ridiculously high. So definitely could see a team falling in love with him, especially if some of those other guys don't have the year that they're expecting at least. But let's jump into some of these spring overreactions because the ACC had kind of a weird year. There's a lot of movement, especially at the quarterback position over there, and some teams coming in. You have SMU, Cal, Stanford all joining this upcoming year, so it'll be fascinating to kind of watch this unfold. But I want to start with Florida State and talk about how I don't necessarily think they hit the quarterback market as aggressively as they should have. And not necessarily to say that DJ Uiagalelei is bad by any means. I really like him. I think he's a fantastic dude. I think he's a great leader. And I think he's a good football player. I don't think there's any two ways about that. But when you look at what Florida State wants to do, Florida State is no longer willing to just be in the conversation. They want to win titles. They want to win the ACC year over year, be in the playoff, possibly win a national title. If we're being totally honest, I don't think DJ is the guy that can get them there. And it's not necessarily that he can't do a lot of really good things. It's just when you look at what he has done in his college career thus far, it doesn't necessarily inspire a ton of confidence, at least from my point of view. And when you look at the quarterback market, there were dudes out there. I mean, we just got a comment about Cam Ward maybe being the number one overall pick. That's a guy that is now down in Coral Gables that you'll have to play this upcoming year. And if I'm being totally honest, I'm imagining Mike Norvell standing on the sideline looking at Cam Ward tear apart their defense and saying, maybe I should have gone after him a little bit more aggressively. So I don't necessarily think that DJ is going to fall on his face. I don't necessarily think he's going to have a remarkably terrible year. But when you talk about Florida State, you want elite quarterback play. You want to win the ACC. You want to go to the playoff. You want to possibly win a national title. And I just don't see DJ as the national title type quarterback. I'd love for him to prove me wrong because he is one of my favorite people in this sport. But at the end of the day, when I look at the player, it's just not the guy that I think Florida State could have gotten and probably should have gotten in this portal cycle. But let's move on to SMU because this is a sleeping beast, and I'm not sure that everyone is fully aware that it is, but I think a lot of people are. Let's be honest. When we talk about the Pony Express, it was the biggest story for quite some time when they had Eric Dickerson, when they were absolutely tearing apart college football in the Southwest Conference. There were a lot of people that were scared of this team, and they finally found their way back into the Power Conference, which should make all of the ACC teams very, very worried because there is an amount of money being thrown around at SMU that would boggle your mind. And especially now that they're in a power conference, especially if they make a little bit of a run in the ACC this upcoming year, that money's going to be wild. I'll be totally honest with you. Being smack dab in the middle of Dallas does not hurt anything. Being the team that, had that moment in the past does not necessarily hurt that by any means. So it gives you an idea of what SMU is capable of. And this 2024 team is very, very interesting. They're getting not a ton of credit when we talk about this upcoming year, but they're really interesting. When you talk about Preston Stone, he's one of the few quarterbacks coming back in the ACC that has a year in the system under his belt, and he can tear apart a defense. There's no two ways about that, and I think he's going to be one of those guys that we might look up towards the middle of the year and say, he might be the best quarterback in this conference right this second. So it's going to be fascinating to watch this team kind of unfold, not only in 2024, but throughout the next couple of years. Because when I look around at the ACC, especially if a couple other teams get out of their way, SMU has a infrastructure that is hard to be rivaled, if I'm being totally honest. But let's jump into North Carolina State, one of the more interesting teams when we go into this year. I think they're going to have the best pass catchers in the conference. From what I saw throughout spring and what they did in the transfer portal throughout spring has just been absolutely remarkable. Noah Rogers was a former Ohio State receiver, was a four-star recruit coming out of high school, as most of those guys at Ohio State are, and had a remarkable spring for the Wolfpack. I think he's going to be their wide receiver one this upcoming year. I think he is absolutely incredible, and it seems like him and Grayson McCall have gotten a really, really good relationship, really good rapport with each other early on there. Then you have Kevin Concepcion, who is one of the most electric players in the country. The only reason that I don't think he'll be wide receiver one is because I don't think he needs to be. And I think the best thing for him and the best way for to utilize him is kind of as a walking highlight reel. We talked about Silas Bolden yesterday when we were talking about college football 25 and players you're really excited to play with. That's another guy that is absolutely on this list, and I think you'll use him kind of in the same ways with end arounds, with screen passes, getting him out on the edge with the ball in his hands, and then letting him do what makes him special, which is his speed and his elusiveness. So he's going to be one of the most fascinating players in the country. I think Noah Rogers will lead the way in terms of receptions and receiving yards, but if we're talking about big time plays, Kevin Concepcion is going to make plenty of them. And then you have Justin Jolie, a very talented tight end coming in from UConn. I think he's going to be a huge player for them. He's definitely had a great career at UConn and is a red zone dominant player. So it's kind of just a throw it up there and let him go get it type of guy. So definitely a huge help to this offense that is kind of missing that. They don't necessarily have that big physical receiver. Well, they got a big physical tight end, so it's not really an issue there. Add that into Dakari Collins, Wesley Grimes, and more. It's going to be a really, really good group for the Wolfpack this upcoming year, and Grayson McCall is about as happy as any quarterback in that conference right now. But let's finish it off with Duke, and we'll keep talking about the quarterbacks here. Malik Murphy made his way over from Texas this offseason. Obviously, there was a big story there with him backing up Quinn Ewers and then Arch Manning being right behind him. That was getting most of the shine, not necessarily Malik Murphy, but this kid can play. There's no two ways about that. Now, Duke is going through a wild change of pace after last year. Mike Elko, Riley Leonard, Jordan Waters, Graham Barton, Dwayne Carter, all out the door for different places. Mike Elko taking a new job, Riley Leonard, Jordan Waters being transfers, Graham Barton, and Dwayne Carter heading on to the NFL. So all of those guys are out the door. Essentially an entirely new regime. Malik Murphy comes with it, and if you're asking me, I think he has one of the best pure arms in the entire country. I think he is one of those guys that can do incredible things with the football. When you look at him, he kind of looks like that Joe Milton type prototype where he can just sling the ball 80 yards down the field and absolutely rip it. But I think he's a little bit more accurate than Joe Milton. I will be fair there. I do think he has the ability to make a really, really good year for himself. As long as that O-line can stand up, he can stand in that pocket and pick apart a defense. Him and Jordan Moore, I think, will have a really, really elite connection. And Murphy can put up eye-popping stats in the passing game. There's no two ways about that. Just if he's given the opportunity, and he finally has been given the opportunity, and I think he might just make the most of it and might just end up on one of those all-ACC teams at the end of the year. But it'll be fascinating to watch all of that unfold. I think all of this stuff is very interesting because when you look at the ACC, you have Clemson, you have Florida State, you have the big-time teams, but there's a lot of teams that are competing for this thing. Miami, North Carolina State, you have Louisville that's coming off a great year. You have a ton of teams out there that absolutely will have something to say about the ACC this upcoming year, and it might just not be the team that you're expecting. But we'll take our final break here, and when we come back, we're going to do a Spotlight Wednesday, and we're going to focus in on the Ohio State Buckeyes. As big of a year for that team as anyone in the country, as big of a year for Ryan Day as anyone in the country. So we'll break down everything you need to know about the Buckeyes right after this, so stick with us.